good morning everyone, welcome back to the 120th. Today I'm just going to give you a quick run through of one of my favourite cameras in the world, the Yashica 635. Starting from the very top, twin lens reflex, which basically means that this is the taking lens and this is the viewing lens. So the idea is that you have two identical lenses on an identical plane, one of which comes through a mirror out the top for the viewfinder, and the other one goes through the bottom to the film. And when you focus, if you look closely, they move in tandem, so that if one is in focus, in theory the other should be in focus, and that is how it works out. I've not encountered any problems. Very popular setup. There are loads of TLRs around these days. There's two up there on the top. There's a Lubitel 166B. There's a Rollercord 3. There are so many TLR brands around. So TLRs were very popular for a long time, until we got really good at SLRs, although there were obviously SLRs being made. Hasselblads are SLRs, for example. My Bronica S2 is an SLR. So the Yashica 635, made by a very well-known company called Yashica, obviously, who appeared after the end of the Second World War, and started building cameras and got very good at it. This Yashica 635 is almost identical to another TLR which they made called a Yashica D. So if you see a Yashica D, the Yashica D and the Yashica 635 are identical, apart from this one, this knob here. Now the 635 bit refers to the fact that this camera can shoot 6x6 and 35mm. So it's a dual format camera, which is pretty unusual. You do need, in its kind of natural form, it takes 120 film and shoots 6x6 by 6 centimeter frames. So you'll get 12 of those to a 120 film. Same as a Hasselblad. Most of the Hasselblads will shoot 6x6 as well. But the 635 thing basically says that you can also, with an adapter kit, load 35mm film. I don't have the adapter kit, and I've never tried. It's not... Essentially, what people get excited about is the fact that if you put a 35mm film through here, because it's obviously built for a much wider film, it will expose the whole roll, so including the sprockets, which is, popular with some people. It's a look, it's kind of grungy look. So on a 35mm film, you have these holes for the sprockets down the side, which essentially in a 35mm camera, you use to wind it on, rather than just tugging at the end. It kind of drives it from the sides through the sprockets. But what many people don't realise, perhaps, is that this whole thing is all made of the same stuff. It's not that you've got light sensitive film down the middle and just celluloid down the sides. The whole thing is light sensitive emulsion, and therefore, if you have a camera that will do it, you can actually expose all the way across, and your images will kind of cross over into the sprocket holes as well. Which, like I say, is a look. I'm not a big one for it. But if that's your goal, if that's what you want to do, then Yashica made the 635 specifically so that you could do that. And you can use 35mm roll film in it as well. One of the big differences between 120 film and 35mm film in the kind of format of how it's structured is that with a 35mm film, it comes in a canister, and as most of you will know, that film comes all the way out. And then at the end, when you've finished, you wind it back in and you come out with a sealed canister again. Whereas 120 film, medium format film, kind of does the opposite, which is where you have your film and then a take-up spool on the other end, and your film winds from one spool onto the other. And so there's no rewinding. So that's what, in general, 120 film cameras don't have a means of rewinding, but that's what this knob allows you to do. So let me talk you through the camera itself. All the controls are on the for the shutter are on the front. So on one side we've got, that's your aperture on that side, and this side is your shutter speed, and it shows through a little window at the top here. And then down here, this is your shutter release. This is your shutter cocking. So you cock, and doesn't make anything like the wonderful noise that the Bronica makes. It's a really quite a weedy kind of TLR, classic TLR sound. Bing. It's like a very, very small microwave finishing. On the side here, you've got your focusing, which obviously is done in a kind of similar to, it just moves this whole front section in and out. You can see that. Now TLRs are quite well known for being a bit rubbish with focusing close, and this is an 80mm lens, so one could argue it's not great for portraits. You can't get particularly close, you can't kind of use that sort of long lens that you would typically want to use for portraits. But that said, it's not necessarily what it was built for. So focus here. This top one is your wind on knob. Now it does not have double exposure protection. So if you want to start shooting double exposure shots or multi-exposure shots, this is a great camera for it. Really, really good. What it does have is a click when you get to the next frame, and it prevents you from winding backwards, obviously, as most of them do. Once it's clicked, then you have to push the button in to turn it on to the next one. Because it's got that kind of measuring and that click, there is no window in the back like you find in a lot of medium format cameras. So you can't manually see where you are, but that, I've never had a problem with it. It's not the most accurate wind-on knob. I have found on a number of occasions that I'm getting big gaps in between my frames. But yeah, so multiple exposures, I mean, the two things, the shutter and the film wind-on are not connected. So wind on to your next frame, compose your shot, cock the shutter, fire, and if you want to just do exactly the same shot again, maybe change the framing slightly, cock the shutter, fire again, cock the shutter, fire again, and that's just going to keep exposing exactly the same piece of film until you wind it on. So, waist level finder. Let me see if you can see anything through that. It's not the best. There we go, you can see it there. It's not the best waist level finder, not by any means. So I have 3-4 other cameras that have waist level finders, and this is probably the worst on. It's the dullest and the darkest, and with waist level finders. So essentially, that image is not boosted by anything. You're straight up looking through a mirror, and so that transfer of light is a big thing. Now, the Yashica 635 was first launched in 1958. And was made through until I think the beginning of the 70s. So it's a 60s camera. And manufacturing back then was not as precise, not as efficient as it is today. And of course, the camera is now 50 years old. So, glass gets dull in 50 years. Mirrors get dull in 50 years. And as you can see from mine, cameras fill up with shit. So I desperately need to get into this and give that a clean, which I'll do at some point, and I'll show you when I do. But waist level finder, if you haven't used a waist level finder, as I found when I first used a waist level finder, they take a bit of getting used to. So what everybody's used to is in a modern digital SLR, where the light comes through, it hits a mirror, goes up, and then essentially hits another mirror. So that light is reversed twice, which means that what you then see through the viewfinder coming through the lens is it's the same image. So it's not reversed, it's not flipped, it's not a mirror image. What you get in here, when I look through the viewfinder, I am seeing a mirror image. So the corner of my monitor directly in front of me, as I look at it, goes down and across. What I'm seeing in here is the corner of a monitor going down and across the other way. So it's a complete mirror image of what is I'm actually seeing in real life. And therefore, looking through the viewfinder, if I want to look further, if I want to see more monitor, instead of it would make sense on here to turn to the left, but I actually have to turn to the right, and it comes in from the right, which is all very strange. I mean, in from the left rather. In this waist level finder, you have your ground glass and a focusing screen, and then you also, in almost all of these, you'll have a magnifying glass, because obviously you want to see as close as you can how good the focus is, and it's quite difficult to see from this kind of distance, and if you get too close and you can't focus on it. So they provide a magnifying glass that just flips out of here. You push that and it pops up. You see that? And it pops up. And that then allows you to get your head right down basically against it. And then you can tell that I can't even focus on these monitors in front of them because I'm too close. That's kind of the focusing distance. It's quite a long way. The minimum focusing distance is quite a distance actually. But when you've got your head in it like that, it's actually really difficult. You can get the left and right. Let's just work this out. What is so difficult? Left and right is easy enough. It's like, fine, I go that way, I go that way. That's right, I can get my head around that. Where it gets complicated is when you get off centre. And so I'm turning this way, and now I'm wonky, and then, honestly, it will bake your brain, and there is nothing you can do about it other than just keep doing it, and keep doing it, and keep doing it, and keep doing it, and you eventually get good at it. And it's not, it only becomes difficult when if you're trying to do things in a hurry. So trying to catch snapshots of your kids, for example, and they're pulling a funny face or they're looking adorable for 2.5 seconds, and you then turn the wrong way and go and get yourself all in a tither. But you get used to it, and that is what all of these cameras will have. You can, as with the, I don't think you can get them for the 635. I've no idea, but with a lot of like Bronica and Hasselblad and Mamiya, you can get prism finders that go on the top that you take off that waist level finder and stick a thing on the top, which then has an eyepiece here. And you're essentially reflecting the image twice, and therefore what you're seeing in the image is an accurate representation of what the camera is seeing. But for me, it takes half the fun out of it, and it makes your camera look ridiculous. And let's face it, part of the fun of these things is wandering around with a camera like this that looks the business. There is a PC port for your flash, if you want, and leaf shutter on the Yashica 635, so it's not a focal plane shutter, it's a leaf shutter, it's in the lens, and therefore no issues with sync speed. It will sync all the way up to the maximum shutter speed, which is 500, I believe. Yeah, there we go, 500. There we go. Another unimpressive sound. No matter how fast you go with this sound is unimpressive. So, there we go, it's an 80mm 3.5 lens, which I've just stuck my finger on, which is good, isn't it? 80mm 3.5 lens. Now, when you're shooting 6x6 and medium format film, 80mm is not actually that bad. It's probably something equivalent on a 35mm camera of something a little bit wider than a 50mm, so maybe like 48mm. I sometimes find the field of view restrictive. But you'll find that within the medium format film world, that is a pretty standard focal length. 75, 80, 85, 90, somewhere around there is kind of almost all of your lenses and all of your cameras are going to be somewhere in that range. So this one is an 80mm 3.5. The Lubitel is a 75. The Rolleicord is a 75. The Bronica S2 has a 75mm on it. Wider lens. So this is obviously not an interchangeable lens. You can't take this off. It is what it is. You might be able to take it off, but it wasn't designed as an interchangeable lens. It was designed as a don't fuck with this lens. So 80mm f3.5 lens, which has a relatively good reputation. I don't think it's one of the best lenses on the market. But the thing for me with this camera is that it takes good photos. There is nothing wrong with it. I have no light leaks. I have no problems. There's no sticking shutter. They are pretty solid. And you won't find too many problems with them. Unlike things like the Bronica S2, where if you just type in Bronica S2 and problems, and it just comes up with a whole host of them. But again, if you look inside a Bronica, if you ever Google online inside Bronica and you see what the Bronica S2 and S2A look like when you take the bottom off, there is this just mass of cogs and wheels and arms and brass and steel and God knows what in there. It's the most complicated system imaginable. This is super simple. There's not a lot to it. I mean, the shutter is the shutter system is the most complicated part. But from that point back, it's just a box, and I'll show you now. So there's no film in it right now. Here's how you open it. Two arrows, one going that way, one going that way. One says O, one says C, which I'll assume for the moment they are for open and close. Undo that. It's this little bit, don't it? It unscrews, it pushes that down, which releases the catch, and that then comes open like that. So you'll see inside here is just a box. There is nothing more to it. As with all of my cameras, it could do with a clean. So take up spool goes at the top of the camera. So here's your camera. Take up spool at the top. Film goes in at the bottom and it runs bottom to top. That is basically it. And then once that's in, then you close it over, turn it over, turn it like that, and you're ready to roll. Oh well, then you roll the film on until you get a number 1 here. In fact, that is moving. There we go. And then it comes to a stop, and cock, and fire. Push in the button, roll it on till you get a click. Cock, fire, push in the button, roll it on. Click, cock, fire. That seems alright. Now that has actually wound on to number 3. There's obviously nothing in there, and what releases that here, this little that is your kind of film counter reset button. So there we go. Yashica 635. I'm going to take this out and take some photos with it, and then you can all have a look at what they look like. Let us load it with film and take it out for a spin. It is a dull, overcast day outside. So I think we're going to load it with Fomapan 400. So now we're going to pull out this little stopper here. This one, that's what gives you the leeway to get it in. Pull that out, slot it in, and then just make sure that that's in the middle. There we go. Right, that is now in. If you look, that kind of pulls happily. We're then going to go up over the top, and on this take-up spool, I'm trying to do this backwards to show you, and we're going to tuck it in to one of the slots in the take-up spool, and then we're going to just wind it, keeping some pressure on the film at the bottom to make sure that it is tight. And I'm going to wind it until the red arrow here lines up with the start. And so we've got film here, take-up spool tightly wound on there, winding on with this knob here. And then once that start lines up with the red arrow, I'm going to close the back. And I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to turn that until it says closed. And that is now tight. Now we're going to look on here, in this little window, let's see how close I can get. Right, it currently says S, and I'm going to start winding. And it wind quite a long way. And you get an arrow comes up, and then you keep going, and then you keep going, and the end of the arrow appears, and then you keep going, and then you get a 1. And once the 1 appears in the window, soon, there, click. And that is the first frame is now lined up. So we're ready to roll. So let's take the Yashica 635 out onto the streets and put it through its paces. And then I'll come back afterwards and we'll develop the film and show you the results. All right. Right then, I'm just down here by the Severn Bridge. There it is there in the background. Well, that's the second Severn Bridge, and the original Severn Bridge is way down there. So I've got the Yashica 635 out, and I'm going to take a few photos. There's this rather interesting tree on the path, which I quite like. It's quite funky. I'm trying to get down underneath it. See if I can prop this up somewhere. Ugh. I've already metered this shot, so I don't need to do it again. There you go. Keep moving. Right, still down by the Severn Bridge. I found this. It's quite cool. So it's metered at 100th at F. What did I say? F10 on the meter. So I might do a stop above and a stop below on frame 3. This is where having only 12 frames on a 120 film gets a bit restrictive. But let's try and prop you up somewhere again. Let's put you there. So we're going to do one at F. I've got 8 and 11. So let's do one at F8. I find framing so difficult because you've got your eye looking right down the viewfinder and you're trying to work out which way you're supposed to turn. So I am just going to hang around this bridge a little bit more and take some photos around here because it's nice and I like it. So I'm just going to snap away. Just going to snap away. Right then, I've shot 10 frames. I'm on frame number 11. So 2 left, and then we'll go back and see what we got. It's quite nice, another nice log here. Let's do that. Everyone loves a log, right? Right then, log. Get my feet out of it first of all. Now I would really like to be able to get the aperture down so I can lose a bit of the background here. A slightly shorter depth of field, but I don't know. F10 500, I mean that's basically the best I'm going to do here. So let's go with F8 at 500. I mean that's still on a medium format, it's still a reasonably short depth of field at F8. Could be nice this. Okay, so what's going to happen now is I'm going to wind, and this time there will be no click, and you'll feel it pull all the way through. At some point you will get a bit of tension on it there, and then you'll kind of pull through that, and that is the end of the paper pulling itself off the spool and entirely wrapping itself around the take-up spool. So there we go. So there we go. You've seen the results of the shoot with the Yashica 635. To sum up, it's a great camera. I love this camera. One of my favourites. I have 3 TLRs, and this is definitely my go-to, even over the Rolleicord at the moment, although I haven't given the Rolleicord much chance yet. But solidly built, reliable, produces beautiful images, still going strong after whatever it is, 30, 40, 50 years. There is that kind of option of using 35mm film if that's what you want to do, but just as a straight TLR, I have no complaints. Does a great job. So there we go, Yashica 635.